Okay, well, welcome to our first Adventure Spark chat. I am so thrilled to be here with Courtney Simone. She is the founder of Adventure in Black. I'm Julie Thorner, the founder of Liquid Spark. We're an adventure tourism marketing agency. And we're here because Courtney reached out to us. One of the things that Liquid Spark is trying to do is help find and amplify the voices of organizations and tour operators and tourism companies and people doing amazing work to in the adventure and tourism industry to with Black and Brown and people of color to really help make sure that they're visible. So we shared a post that Adventure in Black did, and then Courtney reached out to us and had this awesome idea to sit down and have a conversation together. So welcome, Courtney. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I am extremely excited as well, Julie. I think this is an awesome idea that you guys, as far as the conversations are concerned, and I'm really excited to see how this unfolds in the future. So thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. So Courtney comes to us with a really interesting background. You started Adventure in Black in 2019.
Correct.
Partway through the year, you're ready to go full time in 2020, and you're coming off a background in managing global events for sports teams, corporations like GE, Comcast, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA. And then what inspired you to jump into Adventure in Black?
Yes. So this is actually a really fun story. But back when I was working with an organization, we had an event in London and we had been doing those for about 6 months. They were really leadership training events. And my family knew that, I was traveling and had this experience under my belt. And every year or 2 years or so, we have a family reunion where we'll pick a destination and, the reunion will be set there. The vote happened to be DC, which is where I am actually based. And with that vote came, oh, you're also responsible for planning it. Not only do you live in DC, but you now have this background that can be fully supported and make this the best reunion ever. So I was pretty much voluntold that I would be
That's a great term. Love
yeah,
that.
that I would be responsible for the reunion. Thankfully, my cousin stepped in and was like, "Hey, this is gonna be a lot. Do you need help?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So we were able to tag team that. But to make a long story short, we were able to pack out kind of the Holiday Inn downtown DC, right across from the Smithsonian. And it was, I think we had 77 of my family members, and it was a huge turnout. And for me, a lot of people don't know this, but DC is very rich in Black history. Used to be called Chocolate City, parts of it still are. So I really wanted to show that piece, obviously with the White House and the monuments and museums, all of those great things, but also showcase the history and, the music and the community that is also in Washington, D.C., so that they can get a vibe and a feel for all of those things.
Mhm.
And having these conversations with my family members as far as, my personal travels and understanding that some of them were still very apprehensive to travel, especially long distances. It's definitely something in our community that I think we see in older generations, but also in younger generations, as far as just apprehension to leave or apprehension to explore. And this light bulb went off at that moment and was like, if I can get 77 of my family members to come to Washington, D.C. Granted, half of them drove from, 10 plus hours. But if I can get them to open their eyes and kind of see things from a different perspective, what else can I achieve? And that's really how Adventure in Black started with, my family reunion. And I really wanted to be able to showcase just the world to the larger Black family and just be able to say, like, you don't have to do this by yourself. You'll have a community that can support you and back you, and no question is too big or too small. We want to be able to go through this journey together. And I love travel so much, and having granted the opportunity to go to so many different places, and I wanted to be able to share that experience. So that's actually how it started. And that was actually in 2018. Adventure in Black was originally just going to be like an Instagram page of like my personal travels and adventure, and it turned into so much larger. So it's been a very wild ride, to say the least.
What a great story. And what a great feedback from your family. I went to your website. Well, of course, we were doing that when we found your post, but then you and I talked before this. We had a wonderful conversation around what this world of adventure travel is like and how to show up in it and welcome people of color to adventure. And when I went to your website, I was blown away by how powerful it is to go to a site and see all the people. I'm obviously not a person of color, but I go there and I see all these men and women, and every single person on the site is a person of color. And
Yes.
I felt this overwhelming sense of, wow, that's what it feels like to resonate and see the opportunities for you. I get that at a smaller level when I go places and I see women represented instead of all men. So I would imagine that the response to that has been pretty overwhelming,
Yes.
super positive.
And it's been amazing. I will say it's definitely been an amazing journey, from my friends to my family to even people that, I might meet on a webinar that we host, just having these conversations to say, to your point, like, I'm glad to see that I'm representing it. And I'm glad to see that I have a community that can support me. A lot of our travelers, particularly for our upcoming trip in Egypt and Dubai, they're their first time traveling internationally.
Mhm.
And we ended up doing a virtual call, which is like, let's talk about flights, because I never want to assume someone's comfort level or someone's just ability to, book something, which to me might be simple, like an international flight. But if it's your first time, like, what's the plus one? Like, what are these airport codes? I haven't been in the air longer than maybe 2 hours, all of these things. So to have these candid conversations to make people feel more comfortable, so
Mhm.
that way they can have these experiences, has been so rewarding to me. And I love every moment of it.
Well, that's wonderful. So we have all kinds of things to talk about. I want to touch on one thing, and this works kind of feeds into what we're learning. My agency, when you go look at us, we're mostly women. We have some awesome men, but we are not people of color. We're all white, and we are exclusively specialized in adventure travel and tourism. And it is not a white industry in its participants, but what we see in the marketing, and certainly many of the outfitters in the United States, they are largely white. And what we're learning here on our team, we want to be able to market differently. But I'm doing a lot of work with DEI and trying to learn and understanding that there are issues of feeling safe and feeling welcome as well. And you mentioned that when you said, your family members have some apprehension to explore. And there might be a couple of levels of that when you're a person of color here in America, as well as maybe haven't traveled before. And by all means, please help me with my acronyms and words, because this is a chat where you can help me make sure that we're doing what we need to do here. So
Definitely.
that was a reasonably new thought to me. I can certainly relate as a female. There's travel that I don't do as a single female. There are places I don't go. There are places I don't run, etc. That my male friends, they doesn't even occur to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's no idea. There's a whole new level with being Black or brown in America, much less other countries. So, talk a little bit about that. How does Adventure in Black show up for that and help with that experience?
Absolutely. Definitely want to piggyback off of something that you said, and that's kind of the comfort level. We actually have a blog post that talks about the Green Book. And it's basically by Victor Hugo Green, and this is the Negro Motorist Travel Guide. And back in the 50s and 60s, in some places in America, it was not safe for African Americans to travel by themselves or at night, or just to be lingering. And so I feel like that's where a lot of the apprehension stems from.
Oh,
And like I mentioned, this is something that we do tend to see in some of, I would say maybe my father's generation, definitely my grandfather's generation, but it's also something that we see kind of in my generation, thinking about the millennials, for people who might have had parents who just did road trips and didn't fly on airplanes because of this apprehension. So one of the things that we're doing is just making education accessible and having candid conversations. I think one of the biggest things that I feel has had the largest impact, which I didn't even realize would have such a large impact, until we spoke about, was just imagery of seeing people that look like you out and about and exploring. I think sometimes there can be not necessarily a negative connotation to Black people exploring, but it's something that just isn't very accessible. You don't really see it that often, to your point, when you think about the magazines and, the images on TV, they rarely show, Black people in different countries or exploring even their own backyard. So that is really something that we want to be able to break into, to say, hey, not only can you have this opportunity, but there are ways for you to do it safely. There are ways for you to feel like you have the information in front of you, and it's not just coming from, a large airline company like, pick us because we have the lowest rates or whatever. It's actually thinking about the things that are important to them in their journey. So that way they have the knowledge to make educated decisions and educated choices as they embark on their travel journey long term.
Yeah. And, that's something we're trying in our agency to balance our imagery. And we've been doing this for a long time. We want to see at least 50% women. That's pretty easy to do from a female lens. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to actually do a 70-30 split, where of 30% white and 70% everybody else. And, we work hard to do that. We try to do that in our own marketing just as a start. I was having a wonderful conversation with Stephanie Jones of the National Blacks in Travel and Tourism Collaborative. And she pointed out a really important piece I had thought about, but I hadn't thought about it enough, which is we also have to make sure, if we're going to put that marketing out there, like we have clients who are running small companies in various rural areas in America. And then of course we have international clients, and you're doing this with your trips because you have a bunch of international trips going in 2021. So exciting. We also want to help make sure that the environment, once you get there, is a good environment, is a welcoming environment, or a safe environment. I knew that intellectually. Boy, I didn't know it as emotionally, because it's not my lens. It's my female lens, but not the color lens. And Stephanie really pointed that out to me in a powerful way. And I realized there's a balance there in our marketing. Maybe you can help speak to that, because some of the things we're trying to do is really help our clients move forward and help have a more inclusive lens and marketing and in place, if we can impact that, and certainly for ourselves to help do the right things in our own marketing.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great point. And I think a lot of times, out of sight, out of mind, and it's not that you may not be aware of it, but it's like, it's not something that's personally affected me. So I've never really thought about it. Right. So I definitely think this is why I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you, because I think taking those intentional steps to learn and understand is one of the biggest pieces. And I think we have not just a duty as, members of the adventure travel space, but I just think as a conglomerate, as just human beings who care about one another, to make sure that we are thinking about these things, because the world is so diverse. To say like, oh, I never crossed my mind. It's like, well, now we have people where that different thought process and those different viewpoints can all come together so that we can all enlighten one another. So I definitely commend you all for kind of starting that march. And it's not going to say it's going to be an easy one, but I definitely think you all are making the right strides and the right movement to make those things happen. As far as some of the things that we do, we actually get a lot of feedback from our community. So whether that's polls, we actually have a Facebook group. It's just called Adventure in Black. But candid conversations. I feel like, and I will probably keep echoing that, but the more information that we can provide, the more information that we tend to get back also. So small things. What's important to you? What do you need to learn? What do you have questions on? And I think when people feel like they have a safe space where they can communicate those things. Example, we had a flight training for our trip to upcoming trip to Bali, and I was just going through the difference between like discounted suppliers and booking directly through airlines and giving like travel tips and all these other things, because there is a misconception that travel can be expensive sometimes. And I'm like, do this, click here, search here, and everyone was just like, mind blown. I can go to Fiji or whatever for $200. And I'm like, yes. So I think when we can share those types of tidbits, our community is like, hey, what would be helpful is, can we have more of these? Can we have more dialogues around the vaccine, for instance? So I would say reaching out and asking can sometimes, it seems so simple, but sometimes can be the best feedback that you can gather, because not only are you getting the thought process of the people who you're impacting, but you're also able to go back to them and say, okay, did we do this right? And they're going to be like, yes, no, or, let's go back to the drawing board. But that has been the most fruitful thing for us, being able to rely on our community to say, hey, we're thinking about these things. Is this important to you? And they will tell us. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that is powerful. And your group, your community is a powerful resource for others who don't necessarily have a direct way to ask questions. I mean, I can certainly, and in fact, we're doing this at America Outdoors. It's the trade association here in the US for outfitters, dude ranches, and things like that. And I'm on the task force, the DEI task force. And actually helped encourage the executive director to start that. Like, this is important, we should do it. It is, it's a great organization, and it's not diverse, and would like to change that. So we're trying to figure out what questions can we help outfitters ask, and how can we help them collect good information. And it could be there's a great resource with your group to be able to provide feedback. They've likely been a lot of these places, whether it's Colorado or it's New Orleans or Florida or, the Georgia mountains, things like that. They've probably been to many of those places.
Absolutely.
That's really helpful.
And I would definitely just echo that. I think being intentional, but also strategic in your partnerships, I think that's also just a big piece where it's like, okay, we want to make sure that we're getting these opinions, and not just because it's like, we're going to do the right thing, but more so and so that we can make an inclusive environment and also be the change that we want to see, essentially. No, that sounds corny, but it's the truth. But being intentional in those things, I think, is so key. So being able to, tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, we're thinking about these things, but we might not have the community. How can we come into, your space, essentially, and be able to have those conversations with your community? I think people are very open. I feel like more now than ever so now to say, hey, like, we want to see these things. We want to see this change, and we're going to help to support to make sure that it can happen. So,
yeah, that's great. The outfitters, they don't know where, a lot of people don't know where to start. Some people are afraid to start. Some people, they're like, well, what do I need to do this for? And I really feel like we'll bring people along. The more we move forward, some people will be leaders and some people will be laggards, but they'll be coming along going, well, this is actually a pretty good idea.
Yep.
So, yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Adventure in Black. You have an amazing business going. You're going to fantastic locations. Your trips look really, really wonderful. I, of course, love to travel as well. Have been to lots of different places. Your pricing is super affordable. I mean, I'm looking at that pricing going, wow, she knows how to get some great discounts. And it's true, pricing can be, there's a whole variety of experiences. But you started Adventure in Black in 2019, you said, kind of halfway through the year, ready to go full time for 2020. And then boom, the pandemic hit.
Yep.
And you were wildly successful in 2020. So the marketer and traveler in me is really would love to know, what did you do to feed that success in 2020? How did you pivot? And hopefully you'll talk about that amazing Facebook group, because that's such a key part of building this community and
Yes.
marketing.
Absolutely. And I can only say, like, we have been extremely blessed during this time. My team, small but mighty, Lawrence and Lene, they are both amazing. They have really, like, this is not something that I have just done by myself by any means.
Mhm.
They have definitely really stepped up to say, all right, what can I do? How can I help? And, three minds are better than one any day.
Mhm.
Definitely want to give them major props and shout outs, because some of these things, it was like, oh, that is an excellent idea. I would have never thought about that on my own. But part of what we did was really thinking about the virtual event space. And I am one of those people where, pre 2020, had you told me I'd be doing virtual events, I would have said that is hilarious. Not happening. Not a thing. Um, but considering we were not able to meet or gather in, larger spaces, it became a need of creativity, but not just creativity, but how do we make sure that people also still feel connected? So we ended up starting our meetup group. We actually have one in DC, one in New York, and then our Facebook group, kind of the larger catch all for all of those areas. But with that, really thinking about just small things, whether that was virtual happy hours, we would do game nights, or we would do, trivia and Q&A and all of these things. One of the most powerful things that we did recently, actually, was a vision board party, where instead of doing virtual vision board party,
That's good.
but instead of thinking about just like, oh, put pictures up, and I can actually show you, I made these little things of all of these things. Let me see if I can find it for you. Close some of my notifications so I can show you what we created. Here we go. So just these little
Oh, wow.
screensavers and things of that nature. So people can have a digital thing that they can carry along with them, but really being intentional about people's goals and dreams and aspirations. And instead of just saying like, oh, we're going to go to Pinterest and pin some photos. Like, no, I really wanted to know what's important to my community.
Mhm.
And we also have a book club that we have now. So just being intentional and making sure that we can continue to have touch points outside of, outside of just, a Zoom or things of that nature. So we wanted to make sure that that was a big part of what we were doing. And also, we knew people were in the house. So it's like, if you're
Right.
not doing anything, join us. We'll get to meet everyone. And that has created I feel like, such a tight knit network for us of people that are very comfortable to ask questions and to post on the Facebook group and share their moments and opportunities and wins. So for me, it's becoming like a tight knit family. I feel like that's more than anything. We call each other fam and all those other things. But that's been the most rewarding thing. And I think that's really what has kept us afloat for so long. It's because this community backs us,
Mhm.
and everyone is going through a difficult time. Like, this is not just, with COVID, this isn't just something that we're dealing with, the world is dealing with. And I think people are aware of that, and they see that we are that we're trying, and we are thinking about the ways where we can engage.
Mhm.
And it's been super successful for us.
So tell me a little bit about the revenue model in that in 2020, and then more about the Facebook group. Is that a place where you're able to get ideas for what should the next trip be? What kinds of trips should we do? What do our customers, friends, family who are interested in an adventure and Black trip, what are they looking for and what do they need? Did that help you shape some of these trips that are going this year? I'm
Yeah.
looking. I'm putting my hand as to my screen where I've got your site up and these great trips. I've got a double monitor in here in my remote office.
Love it. Love it. So, answer your first question about our revenue model. So when we decided to do virtual, it was purely like revenue was not even like a question. I was under the assumption I had kind of had like a backup plan, considering it was around the time I had decided to leave my job full time and Adventure in Black. So I did have a nice little cushion, and I was like, okay, this is money that I can, not waste, but money that I had saved up for a rainy day. But when it came to our virtual experiences, it was very important to me that it was solely on building our community. That way, those people would say, hey, I've been on 5 calls with Courtney. I've emailed her maybe a couple of times. I've had people reach out to me and it's like, hey, do you mind looking at my website? And I'm like, of course, just small things like that. So it's not, so when they do book in 2021 and beyond, it's like, I already know this person. I'm comfortable. I have all of my questions answered. So that was really important to me to make sure that we did not charge for our virtual experiences. What we did do, however, is really up our educational piece through our blog content. So being able to monetize our blog was really where we saw the most value. Because people are home, they are reading more, they're doing more research, they're using Google a lot more. So what information can we put out there to be not just beneficial to our readers, but also helpful? What information can we put out there where Google is like, this is good content, let's rank you. And we started to look at things from that perspective because we couldn't necessarily charge for our tours. The second piece to that was really thinking about the structure of just our tours in general. As you mentioned, it's important for me to keep our tours at an affordable price. One of the things that part of the reason why we're called Adventure in Blacks is we do a lot in a little bit of time. So if you're going to different places, we might do 3 countries, you can sleep when the vacation is over. That is how I roll. And we've had success with that. But part of it was not intentionally raising our prices because of the pandemic. So figuring out ways where we can substitute the money that would be coming in from tour revenue and place it into other aspects of the business. And I think by doing that, we were really able to thrive and succeed with those means. And then lastly, I would say the biggest piece for us that we'll be doing kind of really this year, we'll be announcing our 2022 tours within the next couple of months or so, is thinking about those different categories. So yes, there are trips that will be a little bit more expensive, but we are thinking about those from a wellness perspective. We're thinking about those from a luxury perspective. So when you land, do you want to get a glass of Clico? I'm not sure. But, so really thinking about those things to market to those people as well. So that way we will be able to have kind of tiers and levels of travel. So that way we can kind of meet people where they are. And also, you might say I traveled with Adventure in Black in 2021. I want to travel with them for 2022, but this time I want to do a luxury trip or I want to do a wellness trip. My goal is to have people literally looking at the calendar when it launches and say, all right, have my book trip for next year. I know who I'm traveling with and I'm ready to go. But all of those methods have been super beneficial to us and super helpful during this time.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, you all have really stepped in to do your marketing with your community building and creating opportunities then for them to gain value with your information and learn about who you are and get actual delivery of benefits every time they engage with you. I mean, that's so powerful. That's something we were trying to really help our clients do last year, because when they weren't running trips, they didn't have anything else to do except share information and be there and be supportive. I love the idea that you're taking your company into one company with a tiered approach. So you've got the Old Navy, Gap, Banana Republic. My set of the different tiers, and you're wrapping them into one company where someone can easily see what kind of trip to get, and you're able to meet a lot more diverse customer base.
Absolutely.
That kind of process. That's wonderful. Tell me a little more about monetizing the blog and how that worked for you. Were you putting ads on your blog? Or was it just an SEO resource to get more people to your site?
It's a combination of really three things. SEO is definitely the main thing. Without SEO, I don't think we would have been able to do this at
Hey,
all.
so many people don't get that. That's
So, taking a hard look at our content and really thinking about what keywords were important, thinking about what content is important, thinking about just the structure that Google likes, because Google likes certain structures. And then taking the stuff that we had already written and putting it in a format that made sense so that we could begin to rank. This was definitely a process that this is I would say an ongoing process for us. We had to take a hard look at SEO because it was just like, oh, we're just writing these cool things. Like, this is great. In a lot of instances, yes, it was great. It was a lot of fun. But when it came down to saying, we can generate profit from this in a time where profit is not being generated, what do we have to do? What are the steps that we need to take? So that was really a big piece. And it's something that we are being intentional about as we start to write new content. So definitely be on the lookout for that as more things are pushed and published to our blog, because that is definitely a key factor moving forward. The second piece to that was kind of the ads. Ads are actually my least favorite. I have always worked with marketing agencies in the past, and being kind of on both the marketing and the event side, seeing a website with ads just like drives me insane.
Yeah.
But we only have them on our blog content. So that was also a very strategic move for us to say, okay, we're going to do this. We're only going to put ads in certain areas. We're not going to like blast them everywhere, because for me personally, it just would have hurt my heart to do that.
Right.
But I think most people are, like, even if you go to Forbes, people are aware that if you're reading a blog or reading an article, you're gonna see an ad somewhere. Even on Facebook, you can't even watch a video now without an ad popping up. So
it's well done. It's not obtrusive, and your content is so it's so strong. It's so varied. From your book blogs on the books that you're reading to your post about Katherine Johnson. That was just the best ever movie.
it was.
And it's such a diversity of travel help and then just cultural information. It's really powerful. I would guess that's one of your top visited sites, pages on your site.
Yes, absolutely. And then also to that point, one of the things that we really had to think about was, okay, what's important to our community? And this is something that we're still really trying to figure out when it comes to, being aligned with our community, what they want to see, and then also being aligned with Google. Sometimes those things do not match up. So we might have to be a little bit creative to make sure that they do. So that is something that we're still really working to develop, to make sure that when we push out future content, we're doing it with all kind of a full lens and full view of the landscape ahead of us. So that has really been how we've been successful through the blog content. Other smaller things that I don't think generate like too much revenue, but thinking about affiliate links. And this is less so for the blog, but like we've partnered with different insurance agencies. We've partnered with World Nomads, because traveling now, it is not, I feel like it was so hard for me to put travel insurance on. People like, oh, I don't have to get travel insurance. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, example A, like
right.
COVID. So now it's like, this is why you need travel insurance. So things of that nature, people go to us because we talk about travel insurance a lot, the importance of it, even pre-pandemic. It was like, this is why you get travel insurance. People were like, okay, I'm just going to pass. And now it's just like, okay, well, I know Adventure in Black has somewhere on their website where we can get travel insurance. So if I'm doing my own thing or, traveling with them, I want to make sure that I'm supporting, or not supporting, but I am, basically taking my investment and making sure that it's secure and making sure it's safe, because we are in a very unknown time right now and want to make sure that you're protected during those instances.
Yeah, and travel insurance is really important. It's also really important to read it very carefully. It didn't cover pandemic things. It may have shifted. When I travel now overseas, I always get insurance. I use World Nomad as well. They're a great company. You have to really figure out what it
Yep.
is you're buying and how it works. But what a great service for your travelers to have that information on your site. They trust you, you've done the legwork for them, and they can move forward with making some choices. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really the big thing for us. I have been the person that's like, hey guys, and I know we see it a lot, but you see the group message. It's like, oh, do you want to go here? And then starts off with 10 people, then 6 people are silent, then it's 4 people, then it comes down to put down a down payment, and it's like one person, and you're just like, okay, well, I guess I won't go. We want to alleviate that, for the person that is either super ready to travel and it's just like, okay, I kind of don't want to do this by myself. This might be my first big trip, or, I don't want to go to, I'll use Thailand as an example, Thailand all by myself. Like, I don't know the language. You don't have to worry about that, but also just taking out of the legwork where it's just really simply you show up for our Zoom conferences, or if at some point when we do decide to have, these in-person conversations, you show up for them, ask as many questions as you humanly possibly have, meet the people that you'll be traveling with. Let's learn how to book your flight, and then we'll pick you up from the airport and the adventure literally starts. Like, let's enjoy the moment. And it should be as easy as humanly possible for people. I don't want you to have to think about anything. We even provide things to do on your off day. So most trips we do provide some type of free day or free days where you might have, a day or 2 or 3, depending on the length of the trip to yourself. But it's like, I don't even want you to have to think about that. Here are some suggestions. If you want to lay in the hotel has this. If you want to peruse, here are some coupons, like all of the things so people can be successful in their journey. Because I have been that person where it's like, okay, I don't know what to do now, and my internet kind of sucks out here, so
Right.
guess I'll just stay in the house.
So you said something really interesting, Courtney. Do you do a Zoom intro call about each trip where people interested can sign up, and it may be at a scheduled time, and then get an overview of the trip and then ask any question they want about the trip?
So we have not done that for the before the trip starts. What we do is something for our participants.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually something that we have considered. Like, do we want to have like a Q&A type of thing situation? And what we've realized is most people, if they have questions, they're going to email us or they're going to DM us. We've tried to do like interest group things, and it hasn't, it's been like fairly silent in the interest group. So we've just waited for people to email us. But what has been very successful is having these touch points with the people that have booked. And it's interesting because after that first conversation, those questions start flying. It's like, okay, like, now that I've met everyone that I'm traveling with, I'm going to post it, like, for instance, and I like to use the Egypt and Dubai version or group because there are a lot of people flying from the DMV area, so DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And in the group, there's people like, who's flying? What days are you guys flying? Can we fly together? Can we do like a group flight and all these other things? So making those connections before we even hit the ground. And again, I don't think this is something that we probably would have thought of unless COVID had happened. Having these pre-conversations so people have the opportunity to meet each other beforehand and have that comfort level. We have a couple of ladies where it's like, she seems great. We want a room together. Awesome. I can make that happen for you guys. So these the small things that I think have kind of shown themselves during this time, which, in hindsight has, of course, been a bit of a headache, but has also been extremely helpful and extremely beneficial to make sure that we can create this community and create travelers that are intrigued and travelers that are engaged and travelers who know that they're going to have an amazing time when they join us for any of the trips that we have.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And so nice to get everyone together prior to leaving to meet one another. And you're right. I think there are ways in which we are operating under the pandemic that are going to continue going forward.
Mm-hmm.
because I actually run a trip to Tibet. It's a women's Buddhist pilgrimage tour to Eastern Tibet. I run it with a friend. I do it just to help them. Well, it was my idea to run the trip, but I just volunteer to go. And so I talk with each of the gals who booked the trip prior to, but it didn't really occur to me to do a Zoom video type chat. But what a great way to go forward and answer all kinds of questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you might pre-record some. You might also get some footage while you're in those locations in 2021 and do some recordings on, hey, what this trip is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is definitely something that we are considering. So how do we so for instance, our Bali trip sold out. It was actually one of the quickest trips that's sold out. It was like, I want to say we posted in maybe a month and a half, close to 2 months later, was like no more seats.
Nice.
So for that, how do we take the footage, because we also provide photography and videography. I like to say that I am working on my personal social presence, because for me, I am the friend that will collect phones at the door at a function to say, we are going to talk to each other and play games. Like, I don't need you to be on your phone. So equally important on the trips, we want you to see everything from your actual eyes, from your senses. So don't worry about photography. We got a whole professional photographer taking pictures, taking videos. We'll send some over. If you want some edit, we'll edit them for you. All that good stuff. But
Wow.
it's like actually looking at the sights and sounds, because it's very different from viewing something that's like, oh, this is so nice, versus actually taking it in and being in that moment. And that's not to say like, people aren't on their phones and stuff like that, but to provide them with additional layer to say, you're here and we're capturing your in the moments essentially. There's power in that. And it's been really helpful.
Yeah, that's actually huge. How many people are just looking at the view through their phone as opposed to really taking that in? And that's, you have a photographer or videographer on every trip?
Yes.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about how 2021 has shaped up for you and what you're looking at for 2022.
Yes.
You've got a sold out trips on your site.
Yes. So 2021, I am so excited. I feel extremely optimistic. I feel like more so now than in January. In January, I was actually in Mexico in January, and I saw all of the craziness that was happening in DC. And I actually decided to extend my trip in Mexico. I was like, I'm not trying to go back right now. But I'm feeling much more optimistic about things now, primarily because it's so many states are being very aggressive, and not just states, but like our government is being aggressive when it comes to vaccines and making sure that people are getting the care that they need in order to really fight this pandemic. And for us, we also want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we're answering questions. Now, and no one on my team is medical professionals, but when we find something, we share it to our community so that they are aware and they can make their own decisions. But as far as our trips are concerned, our list includes Bali, Brazil, fingers crossed. That's the only one that I'm like, Brazil, Egypt and Dubai, and then Thailand. Potentially, we have a partnership where we might do something towards the end of the year in Mexico, depending on how that shapes out. This is funny because originally when I started Adventure in Black, I was in Spain for quite a bit of time, and I had such a great time. And I was like, I'm just going to create an itinerary based off of all the things that I did because they were amazing. And I think people will really enjoy them.
Right.
Mexico is actually very similar, and it kind of brought back a nostalgic memory for me. And I was like, oh, it's coming full circle here. But for 2022, as I mentioned, we actually have a new website being released, so making it easier for people to find information on our website. That's been a really big piece for us, making sure that, we have all this great information. Can people easily navigate the website? And in some instances, yes, but other instances, it could be a little bit better. So for us, just making sure that that experience is top notch.
Mhm.
And that way we can provide the best experience for our customers. But also really thinking about kind of the new tiers of trips that we're having. So wellness, actually focused on a couple of trips will be focused just on women, which
Mhm.
I'm extremely excited about because the majority of our trips tend to be like 80-20 higher on the women's end.
Mhm.
Uh, Guys, if you all are watching this, we don't bite. I promise. Like we welcome you on all of our trips. But we do see a very heavy woman ratio on a lot of our trips. So I wanted to do something where we could have that experience. So thinking about France, visiting Josephine Baker's chateau, all of these great experiences where really we can kind of connect on a deeper and emotional level. So looking forward to that. And then lastly, kind of the luxury piece to this.
Mhm.
So we will be going to the Maldives, and that's just going to be exactly what it sounds: bungalows, champagne, clear waters.
Yeah, sounds
Good
great.
memories. Yes.
Fantastic. We're seeing clients booking up 2020 for domestic drive to vacations, which is different from what you're doing. Our international clients, not quite as much turned on, depending on what they're doing for 2021, maybe a little later in the season. But 2022 is booking up.
Mm-hmm.
Go for that. So I do
And
think that the spigot will be turned back on, and the early travelers will be those who've been vaccinated and have perhaps a little
absolutely.
more courage and are ready to get out sooner.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And for me personally, um, I realize I've really had to follow my gut in a lot of these things, but
Mhm.
also just, to what I mentioned before, seeing how comfortable our community is. We did a survey, I want to say this was in September, maybe, and we got around 100 and maybe 10 responses from people around what they wanted from their travel experience, and how much COVID played a factor in those things, and seeing how we could make tweaks based off of their feedback is
Mhm.
something that I think has really benefited us for our upcoming trips and definitely our trips for next year, because we know how comfortable people feel, like what things are important to them when they're thinking about safety and,
Mm.
hygienic practices and all of those great things and just group travel in general. So we really wanted to be intentional when we thought about putting these trips together and creating experiences where, one, our participant safety was definitely number one, but so they can also have an opportunity where they were still able to enjoy themselves and not feel like they're in like a hazmat suit while they're traveling the world.
Right. How about private travel? Are you getting requests for private trips or is it mostly group trips? I know
So
you.
most of them is group trips. We have thought about potentially doing private trips.
Mhm.
One of the things that we have recently done on our website, and this is not something that we've actually publicized largely, but is kind of private group trips. So, for
Mhm.
instance, if you have a team, we actually had a group reach out recently. They haven't booked yet, but in regards to the Egypt and Dubai trip, they're like, hey, it's 20 of us. We want to do everything that's on your site, but can we do it like on our own?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Like we can do that. Or even, sororities and fraternities. I know that's something that is big in our community also. If there's a group of a sorority or fraternity and you all want to do something, happy to put something together that's a little bit more custom. Or
Mhm.
if you're like, this looks great, we want to do it, happy to accommodate those requests also. But it's not something that we've actually publicized. It's just like a little link. It's like group trips, or group requests. But it is something that I do want to make a little bit more available, particularly since I know people are ready to get out and they want to do things with their friends and family. So,
This has been an amazing conversation. I love what you're doing with Adventure in Black. And I love the opportunity to sit down and talk to you about it. Do you have any comments you would want to share in terms of how can um, how can others in the adventure tourism industry step up and really better support Black travelers and travelers of people of color across all stripes? And Is there anything that you would want to share that could help point us in that right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we touched on this very briefly, but like the concept of change can be so frightening for people. And I think instead of thinking about change from a lens with fear, but looking at it as an opportunity to really grow. Because I think the most successful companies that I've seen are the ones that are the most diverse. They're the ones that have different opinions. They're the one that have people that don't necessarily look like you or look like me. So being able to really embrace change, and people that embrace change in general, I feel like are just awesome people, but really be able to see it as an opportunity to grow beyond kind of your wildest dreams, I think is just a key thing to keep in mind. Um, so that will be the first thing. And then also just be open to real conversations. I feel like sometimes all of the conversations that we have, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, won't be, happy conversations like the ones we're having right now. Sometimes there are conversations that might be a little painful, a little bit uncomfortable, and that's a part of the process. I feel like anytime when you're kind of looking internally or externally, whatever the case might be, you know, everything in life isn't just roses and daisies. A lot of the time it does come with some harsh truths and realities, and I would say just be open to that experience, because the more open you are and the more honest you are around those conversations and dialogues. And when I say honesty, it's definitely for both sides of the table. For us, I know I have been kind of the minority in a lot of my some of my job roles, and there has been situations and circumstances where it's like I'm not comfortable speaking up because I am the only person of color in the room. So, but being able to understand kind of your truth and understand kind of what's going to be the best
Mhm.
for the communal, of to say the least, I think is there's power in that. And the more that we can have these open and candid conversations where people aren't just doing it just to do it, or afraid of what someone's going to say, or afraid how someone's going to feel, I think the better. And I think that is something that I definitely want to continue to do and continue to advocate for, because you never know what can come from a single conversation.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in collaboration, so much power in just being kind of the change that you want to see, as I mentioned earlier. And the more that we can get out there and kind of advocate and work collectively, I think the better. Um, so yeah, but I'm really excited for these conversations, and I do think that just being intentional in those partnerships, and for anyone, when you partner with an organization, just seeing what they're doing also, just holding each other accountable is a really big thing. And the more that we can do that, the better. I think that we'll be, not just in the adventure travel space, but just as a society as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I think that's an awesome cap to a delightful conversation.
Absolutely.
We say all the time in our agency, growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. There's a
Absolutely.
strong moral case and there's a strong business case, and the two together blend well for opportunity for folks who are ready to jump in. And those who aren't quite ready, that's okay. They can watch and they'll follow along, because there's good
Absolutely.
things that can happen. So, last question for you: how do people find you and reach out to you?
Yes. So you can find us at www.adventureinblack. So adventureinblack.com.
Mhm.
We also have the same handles for Instagram, Facebook, um, and then Meetup also. So if you want to join us in any of those forums, feel free. Definitely feel free if you are a Black traveler, ally, or someone that wants to learn more about what we're doing, or just have candid conversations around the travel scene. Definitely join the Adventure in Black Facebook group. Type it in Facebook, it'll pop back up. And we're here to support you in all of your travels and future adventures.
Well, fantastic. This has been awesome. Courtney, thank you so much for this time and
Thank
for
you,
kicking
Julie.
off our very first Adventure Spark chat.
Thank you. I really appreciate you for having me.